We are moving on to the story about Jill Stein. So let's start off with the good news, and then we'll get into the arrest. If you are not following Dr. Jill Stein on Twitter, please make sure that you do so. A lot of the announcements are happening on that Twitter account. And then also, if you sign up for the emails, you'll get announcements that way as well. But huge news happened for the Jill Stein campaign. And I can't tell you guys just how big this is. This is a big deal because Jill Stein just recently received an endorsement from Professor Jeffrey Sachs. And I want to show that with you here. Check this out. Now, they are actually holding a rally that is this Friday at 8 p.m. ET with Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Now, this is huge, and I'll get into his statement, but this is huge. And let me tell you why this is huge. Jeffrey Sachs is not someone that is shut out from mainstream media. You can find Jeffrey Sachs on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, etc., but he also appears on independent media as well. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen him on independent shows. I mean, I've seen him on Bad Faith. I've seen him on, I think he was on Breaking Points, but I've seen him on independent shows. And I think he might have been on Danny Haifong's show as well. Anyway, dude's pretty based on this. Now, check this. Number one, he's an economist. Number two, he is against the war in Gaza. Number three, he's against the war in Ukraine. Number four, he calls out the U.S. government method of spending money for other things instead of the American people. And I don't think he was always this way. I think at one point he was a little bit more, I think, towards the center. But as time has evolved, he has moved further and further and further left. So he has grown. And also, he is a professor at Columbia University, one of the Zionist institutions. And it's true what people say about Columbia. That is very true. One of the Zionist institutions. He teaches at Columbia, which is where the encampments really started to take off. That institution itself has made it very clear that they support the state of Israel. And Professor Jeffrey Sachs is against the war in Gaza. And he's been very critical about Israel. So this is a slap in the face to Columbia and the establishment and the Israeli lobby. This is not someone who is not known. People know who Jeffrey Sachs is. So let's get into the announcement here. Dr. Sachs recently endorsed, I'll make it bigger, sorry. Sometimes it looks big for me, but then when I see it on the screen, it doesn't look as large for you guys. Or maybe I messed that up. Okay, there we go. Dr. Sachs recently endorsed Jill, writing, "The true hope for foreign policy, sanity, and a fair economy is the lead peace candidate, Jill Stein. The main work for peace activists in the next few weeks is to ensure that Stein is indeed on the ballot in every state in November, despite the brazen attempts by the two major parties to keep the Green Party and peace candidates off the ballot. Please join these two powerhouse champions for people, planet, and peace to fire up the fight to get our pro-worker, anti-genocide climate action campaign on the ballot across the country." And you can sign up this way. And Eric, we can put the link in the chat so people can sign up to attend the virtual event. And again, that will be this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that is huge. And honestly, I don't know. And he probably expects this as well. Not sure how much longer they're going to want to keep him at Columbia after that. But he probably expects this. He probably expects that this is coming. Now, I want to show you some of the things that Jeffrey Sachs has said in reference to foreign policy here. Now, I want to start here when he actually spoke to Mark Lamont Hill. We're going to go back, him talking about the tensions in the Middle East. So let's start here so you can understand where he's coming from when it comes to foreign policy.
At the same time, it's saying, hey, you need some restraint here. The U.S. said that it wants to see these tensions de-escalate and that it wouldn't join Israel in any military retaliation against Iran. Question for me is the U.S. doing enough, though, to restrain Israel?
Probably not at some level. I think Israel will do something. It won't be helpful to anything. Israel started this round of escalation with the attack on the diplomatic compound in Damascus. Pretty brazen. I'd say more than pretty brazen, very brazen. Rather illegal, contrary to the Geneva Conventions on attacking diplomatic sites, a clear escalation, and I think clearly intended to pull the U.S. Into a war with Iran, which is probably Netanyahu's dream. I don't think that's going to work. It's a terrible idea, terrible for Israel, terrible for the United States.
And the U.S. has been pretty unequivocal about that. Biden said, we're not getting pulled into a military war.
Right, and Netanyahu seems to think that he really runs the U.S. government, and sometimes it feels
not always
that way.
wrong. Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes it feels that way. So he doesn't take Biden at face value in that sense. He thinks he can manipulate things or force the hand of the United States or get the U.S. to come meekly behind what Israel says, because after all, the U.S. keeps saying no red lines, ironclad commitment, and all the rest. But it's been clear this is not what the U.S. should do and what it wants to do. But Netanyahu is provoking. I do think, again, though there are some serious uncertainties about what really happened with the Iranian attack, it seems more likely than not that there was some pretty bad news for Israel in that several apparently hypersonic missiles got through and hit their targets. That's got to be absolutely alarming for Israel. So I think purely on a military calculation, this was not a good week for Israel.
Okay. So that was his conversation with Mark Lamont Hill after the attacks with Iran. Jacqueline says, does a professor with tenure mean they can't be fired easily? Yes, it does mean they can't be fired easily. However, I will say I have seen tenure professors fired. It took some time. It's not something that happened overnight, but I have seen tenure professors fired. However, they will find a way to remove him if they want to, especially the fact now that he's backing Jill Stein. That also says a lot, because the reality is that they're probably not going to want him to remain at Columbia now that he has endorsed Jill Stein and he's doing this event with her. So you never know. But like I said, if they want to get rid of him, they'll find a way to get rid of him. And by they, I mean AIPAC, the ADL, etc. Right? He was also on Rising, and I wanted you to hear what he said about the history of Israel here.
What the stakes are as the ceasefire is attempted to be negotiated. The focus, I think rightly so, is on the exchange of hostages, but much of the framing that you see in the mainstream suggests that Hamas is being unnecessarily stubborn in giving up hostages. What is it that they see as necessary to get in return in order for such a hostage exchange to be beneficial?
There's a fundamental issue at play. And that is who rules the Palestinian lands. This is the basic issue, and it's been the basic issue for 57 years, since the 1967 war. Under international law, repeated votes of the UN Security Council and repeated votes of the UN General Assembly, there is to be a Palestinian state. The Palestinian state is to include Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. This is clear, and it's been clear for more than 50 years. The Israeli government completely rejects this. This is an extremist government, ultra-extremist, ultra-right-wing, filled with biblical zealots also, who believe, well, this land was given to the Jewish people according to the book of Joshua 2,500 years ago, and we're not discussing anything else. And so this government wants to rule over 7 million Palestinian people. This has been the crux of this issue for 57 years. And talking about a ceasefire without talking about the real issue at stake here is why the U.S. government completely fails to accomplish anything. It's pathetic. But the reason is that it abides by the Israeli government, even though this is an absolutely extremist government that is completely isolated in the world and that violates international law. So either the United States decides it's not going to fund and provide the munitions for a war based on those principles, or it's going to basically enable this extremist Israeli government to try to carry out these aims. If it does the latter, which is the current approach, it just means unending war. That's all.
Okay, so that was his take here, a little bit about the history of Israel. He's also talked a lot about Ukraine as well. And another thing I want to mention about Jeffrey Sachs, for people who are not aware, he's also Jewish. So is Jill Stein. So are AIPAC and ADL and all these other organizations, are they going to call Jill Stein and Jeffrey Sachs anti-Semitic? Now, I did want to clear something up because I think some people assume that he was announced as the VP. He's not announced as the VP. Jill Stein has not announced her running mate yet, but he has endorsed her. And for someone like Jeffrey Sachs, who's a well-known economist who has been on mainstream media multiple times, and I mean multiple times, like this guy's on TV all the time. It's very interesting that he has been the one to do the endorsement. And that makes me wonder if they're going to bring him back on some of those mainstream networks going forward. Now, that's the great news for Jill Stein's campaign. Here's the wild and crazy news. So Jill Stein, again, for those who are not aware, she was an activist before she was a politician. Also a medical professional, right? Medical doctor. Jill Stein has been participating in different actions, whether it was Cop City, whether it's been climate actions, but also, of course, the pro-Palestinian protest as well. We all know that that is something that she's been very vocal about. And again, she is Jewish, so just keep that in mind. Now, recently, just the other day, she was at Washington University in St. Louis, and Jill Stein was there on the front line with the students trying to hold the line. And I want to show you that because she was arrested. And we'll get into the arrest and we'll get into her statement that was made after that. Jill Stein is right here in the crowd with the people. If you look here, you see the girl with the green bandana. And then you'll see, this is Jill right next to her here. This is Jill trying to hold the line.
Hold the line now, hold the line. Hold the line now, hold the line. Hold it down for Palestine. Hold the line now, hold the line. Hold the line now, hold the line. Hold it down for Palestine. Hold down for Palestine. Hold the line now, hold the line. Hold the line now, hold the line. Hold it down for Palestine. Get back! Hey, you get back! You get back! What are you doing? Fascist fuck! Fascist fuck! Fascist fuck! You get back!
So Jill Stein is still in there with this group here, right? So again, this is just another campus protest towards, for peace in Gaza. And, again, the police came in and they escalate things like they always do when they show up to these events. They're supposed to de-escalate. They don't. They escalated things. And Jill Stein is there with the protesters trying to hold the line. Now, this isn't something that Jill has done just because she's running for president. Jill Stein was an activist before she was a presidential candidate. So these are the kind of things that she's known for doing, being there on the ground with the people, right? You'll see the difference between what Jill's doing right here and what AOC did when she showed up at Columbia University. So you'll see the difference. So she was there with the people. Now that's important because Jill Stein was arrested, and so was Jason Call, who's her campaign manager, along with Kelly Merrill Kyer. They were all arrested. I want to give the statement here, and then you'll see the video response from Jill Stein. It says, statement on Jill Stein's arrest at Washington University in St. Louis. Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein, campaign manager Jason Call, and deputy campaign manager Kelly Merrill Kyer were arrested alongside approximately 100 others, mostly Washington University students, at an encampment set up on Saturday on the university grounds. The demand from the encampment was specifically for the university to divest from Boeing, which manufactures munitions used in the ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza at their nearby St. Charles facility. The Jill Stein campaign supports the demands of the students and their peaceful protests and assembly on campus. Student protests for peace and civil liberties has always been represented the best part of our collective moral consciousness. So that's the statement from Jill Stein's campaign there. And then you'll see there's a picture here. This is Jason Call. So it says jail selfies. So here's Jason here in the maroon or burgundy. I know some of you watching would say, girl, just say red. I'm a color expert. Maroon. The maroon shirt here with other protesters that were also arrested. So again, this is a presidential candidate that was arrested. And now what's interesting about this is that the police are trying to say that Jill Stein assaulted an officer. So they're trying to charge her with assault. And you cannot remove the fact that she wasn't also just there for the protest, but they're also there to organize and get ballot access. So it seems like to me, this was a direct intentional hit, not realizing that by arresting Jill Stein, they actually called more attention to Jill Stein's campaign, and it actually makes Jill appear to be more based. This is how you can tell the difference, with the police and what other people are going to see. People will look at this and we're like, oh, people who weren't aware that Jill Stein was running, they're probably aware now. So this can actually backfire against them. Now, Jill Stein did release a statement. She was released from jail here. And this is actually, she shared this on her website. It says Jill Stein released from St. Louis County Jail after arrest. Let's go ahead and get into her statement here.
Let's make Dr. Stein look great. Not gonna hurt. Whenever you like it, Sam.
Yeah, I'm just coming out of jail, so I don't know what my hair is doing.
This will be a very easy first question because I don't have to ask you to spell your first and last name or tell me what your title is because we know all that stuff. Looking good, Sam? Okay, take a breather. How long, well, I'm going to ask this as well. Let's start with this. Yeah. Dr. Stein, when you're coming out, how long were you in there for? What was it like when you were in the St. Louis County Jail?
It was kind of scary, to tell you the truth, because I got separated from the rest of the crowd, and it initially felt like there was a lot of safety in numbers, but then it turned out that I was being charged with assault after being assaulted by a bicycle and basically thrown onto my head backwards. I was charged with assaulting a police officer. Can you believe it? And so I got separated out, and I was alone going through this whole other process where I was going through a medical exam. I had, regular steel handcuffs put on and sat a long time sitting alone in a cell. And I had no idea, did anybody even know I was there? I had been separated from my team. And, was I going to be there all night? Was I going to be there for a week? What's going on and when could I call my lawyer? So I was just completely led through this process, completely blind. And I'm really glad that, we got out. What time were we brought in? When did we get arrested? My guess is around 7:30, something like that, and finally got out at around 1:30 or 1:45, something like that.
So quite a long time. Obviously, you were not here to have all of this happen. You were here, as I'm assuming, to campaign, talk to people in St. Louis.
And to get on the ballot so that voters could have a choice, so that the American public opposes the genocide, wants an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. So we want to get that on the ballot. We want a pro-worker campaign to be on the ballot. We want an anti-war campaign and a climate emergency campaign. We are the only campaign that actually represents all of those issues. So we have a lot to fight for to enable the American people to have a choice, and the American people are clamoring for a choice. They don't want these two zombie candidates rammed down their throat again, and by huge majorities, Americans want other choices. So we want to provide that choice. We have to jump through all kinds of hoops for Americans to be able to exercise basic democracy in the voting booth. We have to collect, I don't know what it is, something like 10,000 signatures total in Missouri in order to get on the ballot. So if people want to be sure that you have an actual choice on the ballot, you can contact either our campaign, JillStein2024.com, or get in touch with the Missouri Green Party to help.
Let me pause here for just a second. Alexis said hopefully she can sue the police department. And I think she should, because if you look at the video, obviously they were the ones that were pushing the bike again, you see how the way that they threw the professor, one of the professors in another video, again, a female, the way the guy grabbed her and just threw her on the ground, so it's like, see how they twist the story and say that she was the one that was assaulting them. So it's very, very telling, guys, very, very telling. And I think that what we have to remember as well, again, Jill Stein, she's been through this before. She's protested multiple times before. Obviously, she's been arrested before. But this is to send a message. Like I said, if they're trying to silence Jill Stein's campaign, they actually just gave Jill Stein's campaign more attention. And I want you guys to pay attention to what's happening this time around. Last time Jill Stein was here, she said, notice we haven't been brought on Democracy Now! This time around. Because in reference to ballot access, they know that Jill Stein will be a threat. Last time when Jill Stein was on Democracy Now!, when she ran in 2016, they didn't realize how much of a threat she was going to be. Jill ended up getting on the ballot in over 40 states. She'll probably get closer to 50 this time around. So you don't see her on Democracy Now! I haven't seen Jill Stein on Breaking Points. If she has, let me know when I missed it, but I haven't seen her on Breaking Points. She has been on Rising. Notice how mainstream media is trying to shut her out. They brought her on CNN at the very beginning of the announcement of her campaign, but these people are not interviewing her the way they're interviewing all the other third party and independent candidates. I have yet to see Chris Cuomo bring Jill Stein on to talk to her on News Nation, but yet he's got RFK Jr. on there every time you turn around, because they know that when it comes to ballot access, this is going to be a significant threat. So they're trying to do what they tried to do with Bernie Sanders, which is that they're going to try to silence her as much as possible and just not give any attention to the campaign at all. So that way people won't be paying attention, then they won't even realize that she's running. So the question is, now with what happened to Jill Stein, she got arrested and all this stuff. Are these other programs, are they going to cover her now? And if they don't, you should be suspicious of that, whether you're for Jill Stein or not. The reality is, as much as they're talking about RFK Jr., the reality is when it comes to ballot access, she has the most ballot access, and her access is only going to continue to grow. So if you're in Missouri and you want to see her on the ballot in Missouri, contact the campaign and see how you can help in reference to helping them collect signatures during those drives. That'll be a big clap back to the police who arrested her and other members of her campaign. That'll be a big clap back. But the good news is she got an endorsement from Jeffrey Sachs. That is huge news, like I said. But of course, as you know, they were arrested. And I think, again, like I said, that is giving her campaign even more attention. I would also say Jeffrey Sachs probably knows that by giving this endorsement, it probably could hurt his chances in reference to his professional career at Columbia University. He's probably well aware of that.